For today's episode of my blog, Rare, we are welcoming Kamran Maskin. So welcome, Kamran.
Thank you.
So Kamran is a sales leader with over 20 years of success in the pharmaceutical industry and has varied commercial expertise in sales, marketing and pricing, channel development, and has led challenging market access projects within the rare disease space. So first of all, Kamran, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe a whistle-stop tour of your journey so far?
Yes, absolutely. So firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to do this. So going on to the first bit, how did I get into the industry? So I always enjoyed science at school and ended up doing my undergraduate degree in physiology and pharmacology. I was interested in pharmacy initially, but after having done some work experience, I didn't think it was for me. So it did fascinate me how drugs worked on the body. So during my studies, I learned a lot about the process of how a compound is developed and goes from clinical trials to licensing, and then ultimately into commercialization. I also knew some people that were in the industry, and so one in research, one in sales. So I did have some basic understanding. So that's initially how I got in. So after graduation, I worked for Parexel, which is quite a large contract research organization. And I was doing clinical data management for them on a large oncology trial, which was at that time run by or conducted by Novartis, which treated multiple myeloma and cancer-borne metastases. So when I was involved in that, I was there for about 2.5 years, and that really opened my eyes to the level of detail, time involved in taking a drug through the whole clinical trial process and the amount of paperwork that was actually generated. So part of the data was working on lots of quality of life questionnaires for this trial, and I could see the responses that patients, or the difference it made to patients. And obviously it was randomized, but just reading some of that information, really enjoyed it. So that ultimately is how I started the journey. And then I made a transition from clinical data management into sales and a commercial environment, simply because I wanted to be outside, meeting people, talking to people, and that also fit the prerequisite of, I think, ultimately helping patients receive, very, very good medication.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And so having moved into the commercial kind of side of things, you've worked on the development of operations for a startup rare disease company. Mm-hmm. So what would you say are the main challenges startups face in getting off the ground in the rare disease space? And do you think there are any particular challenges for the UK?
So I think the challenges are very, very similar across the board. I mean, being a new startup, you are an unknown entity with physicians, with other KOLs, so you have to establish that structure. And ultimately, it's about getting the right people into the organization. Simple things like not having, HR or even like an office. And we were field-based or home working. And our office, I think I visited it literally about 6 or 7 times in the 5 years that I was around. So having the right tools, right people and experiences is probably the key thing. One of the learnings of setting up or being in a startup environment, because the company that I was involved was spun out from the University of Sheffield, where an endocrinologist had come up with some ideas about a couple of products, and these were problems that he was seeing. So we had some aspect of the physician journey, but I'd say give yourself plenty of time before anticipated launch to establish the team structure, key functions, and then focus on mapping the patient journey. And I think this has come across in other companies. It's similar, making sure you know the patient journey, physician journey, diagnosis, treatment, how you're finding your patients, and having the stakeholders involved. So really peel away those layers and get into the crux of what that patient is going through. And I think that's really, really important in terms of setting up and starting up in that environment. So it's applicable to other organisations. It's just more the basics that probably aren't there initially of have been a new organisation.
Yeah. And so from your experience, what would be the main thing startups looking to commercialise then in this space consider?
So I think if initially, like I said, you are a really unknown entity. So building up networks around your therapy areas and KOLs is absolutely important and vital. I mean, pharmaceutical companies are under real pressure to reduce drug prices and demonstrate greater value. And this has to be done with value-based outcomes. And now, even so, more so, is real-world evidence and how that applies and what savings can be made. And as part of this, a lot of people are involved, from patients to regulatory authorities, policymakers, and payers. So the rare disease arena has become quite large in the last decade. And some drugs are very, very expensive. So, and this it will grow, the market will grow. So I think that's why you have to demonstrate that. One of the learnings we had was that once you've setting up the clinical trial side of things, is to build in what outcomes you're looking for at that time in relation to what maybe national HTA agencies are looking for when they're looking at pricing and reimbursement for that particular drug. So the journey starts well before you've actually got the license, and it's equally as important as having the licenses to demonstrate that value and being able to do that from the clinical data that you've got. So places like Germany with their AMNOG process is very, very rigorous. So looking at that and planning that in terms of what they might be looking for, I think is absolutely vital. So similarly in the UK, NICE and SMC are absolutely vital, and getting that process right to then effectively commercialise successfully in the UK, I'd say.
Right. No, thank you for that. That's really insightful. So with that, thank you for featuring on this episode of Rare. If anyone does have any questions for Kamran or would like a conversation, I'll include my email address. So please feel free to send them through to me. And then I'm happy to connect you. So thanks a lot once again. It's been great to have you on board.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lauren.